Are you looking for a way to trigger Azure Functions when an entity is added to Azure Table Storage? You're not alone. Many developers face this challenge, and today we're going to explore how to tackle it. I completely understand your frustration. It can be really confusing when you see triggers for queues and blobs, but not for table storage. You're definitely not the only one wondering about this. Here's the specific question we're addressing. One user asked, is there a way to trigger Azure Functions when an entity is added to Azure Table Storage? They noticed that while there are triggers for queues and blobs, table storage seems to be missing. Let's dive into this together. So, what's the deal with Azure Table Storage triggers? Unfortunately, as of now, Azure Functions does not support a direct trigger for table storage. But don't worry, there are workarounds that can help you achieve your goal. Stick around. By the end of this video, I'll share a clever workaround that will help you set up your Azure Functions effectively. To trigger Azure Functions when an entity is added to Azure Table Storage, the user will need to implement a workaround since there is no direct table storage trigger available. The user can create an Azure function with an HTTP trigger. This function will be called whenever a new entity is added to the table storage. Next, the user should implement the logic to add an entity to the table storage within this HTTP triggered function. This way, every time the function is called, it will add a new entity. Finally, the user can set up a client application or service to call this HTTP trigger whenever a new entity needs to be added to the table storage. Fun fact: Azure Functions can scale automatically based on demand, which means you can handle a huge number of requests without breaking a sweat. Just like a superhero, they adapt to the situation. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. This user points out that there is currently no trigger binding specifically for Azure Table Storage. They suggest using an HTTP trigger combined with Azure Table Storage as an input binding. This method allows you to pass table data while relying on a separate trigger. Additionally, they mention that using a queue trigger could also be a viable option depending on your requirements. Let's take a look at another answer from another user. This user confirms that Azure Functions currently do not support a direct trigger for Azure Table Storage. However, they suggest that you can still use Azure Functions by configuring them to accept data from table storage as an input binding. This method works effectively for your needs. Additionally, they propose an alternative approach for triggering your functions automatically. You can use Azure Storage Queues for smaller applications or Azure Service Bus for more robust business needs. Here's a pro tip. Consider using Azure Logic apps to monitor your table storage and trigger your Azure function when changes occur. This can simplify your workflow significantly. And there you have it. While there's no direct trigger for Azure Table Storage, using an HTTP trigger or Azure Logic apps can help you achieve your goals. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more tips and tricks.